It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid!
Yeah. No fear here and Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock. Oh, I'm looking forward to this, but we are limited on time. So what we're going to be doing, where Sterlin Lujan is just like an hour quick. We need a 3-hour minimum. I mean, there's so much stuff, and he's really busy. We're busy, and this is the earliest we can do it. We'll schedule something for another time. But I did want to introduce him, do a little bio on him, say what's up. But there's so much, and he is so inside the crypto world. And, we'll do all the why you care and why this and where you came from and how and what and so on. But, I'll just kind of sum up a lot of the stuff so you know who Sterlin is. And then we'll get into a teaser for the next time, because I'm telling you, it's going to take an hour of teasing, and you're going, damn, I want to hear the rest of that. Holy crap. Sterlin's a cryptocurrency professional, Logos Core contributor and futurist. He is the former communications ambassador for Bitcoin.com and author of the book Dignity and Decency, Rhapsodic Musings of a Modern Anarchist. Oh, my God. Anyway, he has worked full-time in cryptocurrency and blockchain for 8 years. Sterlin is a cyberpunk and network state scholar and takes an interest in leveraging cryptography and technology to free the world and create voluntary governance services. We're going to spend some time on that. Sterlin has spoken at dozens of events around the world, including the Block Show Conference in Germany, Crypto Finance in Switzerland, Steamfest in Portugal, CoinBR in Brazil, acted as a liaison for the crypto community at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Mongolia. He has debated Peter Schiff on the merits of cryptocurrency at LibertyCon in Washington, D.C., on and on and on and on. That's enough. All right, this is what is going on. My concern of where cryptocurrency is going can be answered by Sterlin, I am sure. But the first thing I want to do is just have him say hello, introduce himself a little bit, talk about what projects he's passionate about now, and then we're going to get into some other more personal and motivational stuff and where the future is. Because I know Sterlin for a long time, and we've done a lot of shows and so on, but we haven't got as deep into what I wanted to talk about now, and we'll save that for another time. But go ahead and tease us, man. What you working on?
Yeah, brother. So it's kind of funny. The intro said I've been in crypto for 8 years. I glossed over that when you sent it to me. It's actually 10 years now. I feel like it's been a little while since we spoke, but maybe we just haven't updated it. Right. So yeah, man, I've been in crypto, generally speaking, for 10 years, but the last couple of years I've been working in a space that was birthed by the cryptocurrency industry, and that's the network state or cyber state or parallel society ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. And then maybe I can express a bit of that idea, and I'll talk more about what's going on. So network state or cyber state are just communities that are both digital and physical. So they have a digital component and a real world component, where people who share values come together so they can work together to build technologies that help push our society forward and generate more liberty ultimately. But a lot of these folks in crypto who seeded these parallel societies, these so-called quote-unquote network states, one of their primary goals is finding jurisdictions where they can have a regulatory sandbox, where they can work to build out whatever the kind of technologies that they see as useful or beneficial. Because as you know, Ernie, and the audience well knows, that the regulatory environment in the U.S. and anywhere in the first world, they make it very difficult to construct and build technologies, especially if those technologies are antithetical to whatever the government is working on or whatever current systems and regulations are in place. So that's that. Other than that, specifically, I've been working with Logos. Logos is a organization that is developing the infrastructure tools, the technology for the development of network states. And then recently I also founded my own organization called Polis Laboratories, which is specifically focused on the real life aspect of network states. And the idea is that Polis goes into these locations and then provides advisory services and collects data and research on the human organization capacity that's happening on the ground. This includes governance. And by the way, this is something we can go into. But when I say governance, I don't mean government, right? Governance is just a voluntary collection of rules, right? So most people will probably know, private property, right? Don't fuck with my stuff and I won't fuck with yours. That is a given tenet, but that's also quote unquote rule, right? Anarchy with means no rulers, not no rules. So this is the governance piece that Polis works on, helping effectively make sure that the sense-making practices and the community organization elements are in place and make sense within the context of these communities. It's really research-focused because we want to understand what works and what doesn't so we can share that information, share that wisdom for other communities that emerge. Because and I want to be very explicit and clear about this network state, cyber state movement isn't a flash in the pan. This is something that's happening all around the world. They're beginning to proliferate, and to bring it from an abstract sort of concept to the ground, a lot of people probably on this that are viewers and listeners of your podcast probably have heard of Prospera, which is a it's a ZA is what it is, but that's a zone of economic development and employment. But it's really a free city or a network state where people come together to develop technology. A lot of those guys are focused on biotech. You also have Balaji, who started the network school in Malaysia, which is also focused and centered on developing technologies. There are a lot of crypto-focused guys at Balaji's. And then you have things like Praxis. Praxis is another community. They haven't got a physical location yet, but they have a location in the cloud. And then you have things like Edge City and Zoo Village. Those are pop-up villages that are looking for permanent hubs. I've been to these actually. There was one in Switzerland called Zoo Switzerland or Switzerland, and I was there for a month helping lead that community, and they're looking to build out permanently in that location. So I think one of the overarching themes that we're going to discuss along with the crypto component of this is that these communities are blossoming all around the world, and they represent a transitionary phase from how we currently live under quote unquote a nation state, and we're starting to see a more decentralized community. Where that goes into the future is anyone's guess. I'm for freedom personally, just like you are, Ernie. Who knows how it's going to pan out, but I'm going to keep pushing in the direction of freedom for sure. So I'm sure there's a lot to unpack there and a lot of questions.
There's what we're doing is making sure that I'm trying to get oh my God. I had to update my Linux, which is why I have Linux, is so all these updates don't screw up stuff. And when I did, man, it jacked up stuff. But Sterlin's been patient with me. Now, what we're going to do is I want to give a little bit of history of you so people understand who you are. This has been a real revealing process for me as a narco-capitalist, libertarian, leave me alone-ist, voluntarist, the man can suck it guy, since the late 80s. It became very clear to me. That's why the show is Declare Your Independence, because the Declaration of Independence was, really spoke to me. As a young man, I'm going through what the hell is going on. And in the late 80s, you had the stock market crash in the late 80s. You had the, savings and loan fiascos going on. We're just ending the Cold War. I grew up in the shadow of the mushroom cloud. I mean, it was, oh my God. So it has an impact. And I remember going to the library, this is pre-internet, going to the library and pulling out, all right, what's the deal? Where's the documents? Declaration of Independence, Constitution, Bill of Rights. Constitution was, this is how we're going to rule you. I mean, there's not a lot of, great in there. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to use this structure, and you guys figure it out. Republic, if you can keep it, kind of thing. But they had to have the Bill of Rights, the 10 thou shalt nots of government. There was going to be another revolution. They're going, no, man, no, there's way too much power here. And freedom produces a whole bunch of stuff, and you're going to want to get the stuff, and everybody's going to use you to get the stuff. So this is how you're not getting the stuff. And, oh, by the way, free speech and guns and stuff. So the Declaration of Independence was very clear. The purpose of government, defense of individual rights. If it doesn't do that, it's time to alter, abolish. It's your right, your duty. Boom. Sign me up, okay? Sterlin is an anarchist. It's not there's no rules, there's just no rulers. Well, he come to understand this by, being a, couch surfing, video game playing, mid 2000s slacker, smart guy, didn't have real motivation of, didn't know nothing about nothing, don't care. All right? Then, he has a friend says, here, try this ecstasy thing, man. It'll open your mind. Woo! Man, I'm in. I got all motivated. He's, he wants to go back to school. He wants to learn. He wants to, and by the way, he can fund it by selling it. So then, one of his friends gets busted for selling something. They kick in his door. He gets into the drug war system of, oh my God. Eventually, a year or so goes by, passes through, gets through all that crap. The Ron Paul Revolution hits. He's like, whoa, I've seen this story a gazillion times. I have taken so many selfies with people with Revolution tattoos that I can't keep track anymore. Now, the thing is that what happened is that Sterling read a book by Ron Paul that mentioned Rothbard. You get Murray Rothbarded up, man, that'll cure you, okay? So he reads Murray Rothbard. He's like, well, crap, man. That's all you had to say. I'm an anarchist son of a bitch. Let's go get some. So, he goes down that road, about 13. We've been covering Bitcoin, blockchain since 09. Since right at, because we were pushing silver as, people money. Then you get the digital version of it. We're like, okay, they can both kind of, fill a need, and let's go crypto and precious metals. So during that, in about 13, is when Sterling's like, oh, I am healed. Well, he goes back to school. He gets involved. He eventually becomes Bitcoin.com's ambassador. I mean, he's writing. Roger Ver, is someone I respect a great deal. There's few people in the space that I really have. We don't hear from Eric Voorhees that much, but he was very influential, for me. A guy that I think understood what was going on. And Roger. Sterling's just a hell of a nice guy. He always doing on these freedom projects. But what made Sterling different is he went back to the base foundation of any society. Everybody, the poor, the unbanked, the vendors on the beach, in the slums of Rio de Janeiro. I mean, Smart Coin was one of his projects I was, very interested in and how they were doing that. So he comes at it from a very philosophical, anarchist, leave me alonist. How are we going to have a future society that can operate with information, transparency, clarity, and you could be and do whatever you want, but this is my concern. Now, first off, how far off am I? I kind of, get the background up to speed. I kind of got you going there.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. And I know out of the 3 or 4 times we've done this in the past, we've talked a bit about my background, but you nailed it, brother. It's been a really long road, a lot of trauma and a lot of hardship, all the drug-related issues, the MDMA, the wake-up call, then the police raid. Yep, that's certainly what set me on the path. And 100%, I don't know who can pick up Rothbard, right, Anatomy of the State, or New Libertarian Manifesto and not understand and internalize the way the system is, right? Chapter 3, the state, is really the piece that really woke me up, and then I started pushing it forward. And ever since then, of course, been unhinged. But yeah, brother, you got it. Just let me know where you want to take the convo.
Well, this is the one thing I never got from you, the why you cared. You know, it gets even more fundamental that this philosophy resonated with you had to be for a reason, an upbringing, a grandmother, an uncle, a coach, a teacher, or something. You know, that why do you care? You know, no, this is the way it should be. You shouldn't have this monopoly of force of these individual kind of blah, blah, blah. I'm going, well, where did that come from? Where did that sense of justice come from? Somebody at 5 years old or something did something. Answer that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Listen, Ernie, this is what happened. So as I mentioned before, when I was in high school, I was really just a zombie. I wasn't really, as I was growing up, I really wasn't paying attention to anything. I was just going through the motions. But deep down, there was a sense that I could do more with my life. Even right now, even as a high schooler, I remember reading my own books, and they had this reading program in school where I was supposed to read these books that they wanted me to read, but instead I read my own, and I actually ended up getting in trouble for that. No, you have to stay on this program. You have to read these books, the books that we tell you to read. So these things were happening, but I wasn't clued in at the time due to my youth about the authoritarian nature of the system. So I was really asleep. I was in a comatose stupor, just slavishly moving through life, right? And then when I got out of high school, I went into a technical college for a little bit of time and then dropped out. I spent 2 years. I was going to be a graphic designer, but it didn't jibe with me. I was just going through the motions, right? You go to school, then you go to school, and then you go to school again, and then you get a job, and then you get married, and then there's a white picket fence. That is the way that society has provided the pre-plan for our lives. So what ended up happening is, as I was kind of trying to figure out my life in my early 20s after I dropped out of college, that's when I took the MDMA, and it was really the drug, the chemical, that provided this really profound Zen Satori moment where on the come up of the drug, I actually had this amazing wake up call. And I had this mantra in my head where I just told myself over and over and over that I'm a lot smarter than anyone had ever told me that I am. So it was really a moment of self-affirmation and self-reformation, really. At the moment, I really woke up. Now, I didn't have all the anarchist ideas, all the libertarian and freedom ideas just distilled in my head all at once. But I did start asking questions. And one was, why the fuck is this drug banned? If I took this and it woke me up, made me realize that I'm better, it helped heal my traumas, and it also gave me the idea to go back to school, why is this drug illegal? So I started
you just answered your own question.
Right. Fundamental, right? It ended up working out like that. But really what spearheaded the final transition was, after I took the drug, over the course of the next 2 years, of course, I was like, oh, if this happened to me, it can happen to other people. I can help wake people up. So I kind of became the cyber techno shaman. I was going around and I was giving MDMA to all these different people in my lives with the hope that it would have the same effect, right? I felt like if I was asleep and this created a quantum personality shift, if it changed me on a fundamental level, well, then other people can probably change as well. The reality is, after years, just a side note on that topic, is that different people are in different places of their lives, and some people MDMA doesn't really have any effect whatsoever, but that's a whole nother conversation. So what ended up happening then, of course, is I got slowly into just dealing the drug. I was giving it to my friends. It naturally evolved into a business. And yes, that was very helpful because at the time I was working at Walmart making really shit money and super poor after college student just meandering through life, of course. And then when I got busted, when the cops raided my house, they finally, and I'll give just a little bit of background on what happened. So I was holding about 500 pills of MDMA and some 36 grams of cocaine for this friend of mine who had been in the dealing game for many years. And according to the court records, he had sold to an undercover cop, but I think he had probably already flipped. This isn't something I've talked about online but now it's been so long it doesn't matter. But it's possible that he flipped. I'm not really sure. But that what happened then is an undercover cop came to the house and scoped it out where I was living, and then about 10 or 15 cops raided the house. They pretended to be they basically pretended to be a maintenance or a service person for the apartment, and then they knocked and I opened the door, and then they shoved their way in. I thought at first I was just being robbed, but really it was a robbery. It was just the state rather than a private robber. And long story short, I ended up getting carted off to jail, of course, and then charged with possession with intent to deliver. And they also hit me with an engaging and organized criminal activity charge.
Yeah, whatever they can add. I mean, they just keep dumping on crap. You know?
Oh yeah, they get someone, they can just add whatever nonsense they want in terms of charges. That's how they try to, give people the maximum sentence that they can. Where I got lucky is the fact
plea.
Yeah, that's right. Which is what happened, right? I got lucky though, and the drugs did not. If they didn't cross state lines. It was all within the context of Texas. Had the drugs gone across state lines, then it would have violated federal, interstate commerce drug laws. And then, of course, they could have hit me with RICO charges from a federal level and all this bullshit that I'm lucky I didn't have to deal with. So because it was city-based and it was local, I was able to hire an attorney that really knew and had an in with the local district attorney and the cops and all that good stuff. And he was able to wrangle a deal. And I ended up getting 10 years in paper prison, right? Had 10 years of probation. Actually only did 5 years. And then I wrote a letter to the judge and got released early for being a good boy, peeing in their cups, right? And doing all the paperwork and going to the probation department and all that bullshit.
I'm so sorry.
Right. Please let me go, Mr. Judge. So the final thing that happened is during that probationary period, now I had direct personal experience with the state. I knew how corrupt the system was. I knew how anti-human the whole probationary and I can only imagine what it would be like to actually be in prison, but the whole system is super dehumanizing, all for me engaging in voluntary activity on the market and not harming anyone. I mean, you know as well as I do that this really just encapsulates how awful the system is, and everyone's so programmed and brainwashed to believe that their fellow humans who do free things on an open market without violating anyone else should be kidnapped, hauled off, and thrown into a cage. That's bollocks, man. That's nonsense. So I started then, of course, that was right around the time of the Ron Paul Love Alute. Ron Paul was just coming up. This was circa 2009 when I got arrested. And I read his book, In the Fed. And of course, he references Rothbard a number of times in that book. Ron Paul's book was great. I was already into the libertarian vibe. I knew now kind of the direction that I wanted to go. But when I read Rothbard's book, it solidified everything in my head. So the reality is that there wasn't some person in my life, my parents, as nice as they are and as good of people as they are, they weren't really thinkers. They didn't feed me books or ideas or anything like that. I had to discover this for myself, and it all started with the drug experience. And then I went through the process of completely formalizing the ideas in my head after reading a ton of material. Rothbard was part of it, Ron Paul.
So the state made you an anarchist.
Yeah, literally. Yep. I mean, this is what happens, right? The state has a way of creating dissidents. So, they make, I hate to use this term, but it is true. They make enemies out of the people they go after. If a person has feels a sense of injustice, right, or there was an injustice done to them. So yeah, that's the whole story.
This is good, background. Thank you for clearing that up. And but I've heard this kind of thing a gazillion times. I'm older. I'm 64. I've been a libertarian, anarchist, leave me alonist, activist, whatever, since the late 80s. And I'm just the drug war generated and created so many families against this kind of injustice. Then you have things like what they do to your kids in education. Then you have just individual people that are kind of genetically. I don't like it. So I've come to really ask that question, why? Why did you feel that? Why? There has to be a why reason. And a lot of times it was, a book, a circumstance, a relative, something that just you have these Myers-Briggs personalities that, goes into this justice quotient. There's a justice gene. There's something, and when you go, why do they have where you can't do an experiment and do your own pursuit of happiness of whatever kind? Well, that's why they don't want you realizing that they suck. That they represent the bad, portions of society. So this is where we get to crypto. You get to crypto and you see an opportunity to make people's lives better by eliminating the need for the state. You have blockchain technology that can be, transparency. The electorate can see, or the people, whether they vote or not, or doesn't matter. They're going to get money taken from them to support it anyway. So what happens is you have a society that can be based on voluntary interaction. The possibility is there. This is something that was not available to us as young activists in the 90s. The 80s, 90s. Someday, now of course they, them, those wanted to have the technocracy portion of it. They wanted, we want to control everybody. We want to program the money. You can do this, you must do that, and you're not allowed to, and you have to. It's all the have tos and can'ts. And for the good of the children, the children, that's it, it's the children. So this is the opportunity to be able to govern ourselves as individuals, not have a government, up there, telling us everything. Governance, anarchists are not without rules. It just don't have rulers. And people, that's why they would demonize the terminology of anarchist. Anarchist, bad anarchist, when that was really the solution. It's just a psyop. So what happens is, during the Ron Paul evolution, a lot of people just like you, by the thousands, it was amazing. I took my wife on the road. We were pushing, I made a Ron Paul evolution sign, all that kind of stuff. So when I go, Dottie, you got to come see this. All the stuff we've been talking about for decades, it's happening right now. I'm sitting here watching. You got to go experience this. Then you have these kind of interviews and conversations, but now you're not a kid anymore. You've grown up into, how can we create something that can have a positive impact on the planet? It is not any longer a thing that's just America or your state or, something like that. We're uncovering the secrets and exposing the lies, okay? So now we move into Palantir. Here comes Peter Thiel. He's inside the administration. We got Trump, and they all love them some crypto. I see you up at the Bitcoin conference in Vegas here a couple months ago. Woo! Sailors out there going, man, everybody just buy Bitcoin. Keep buying Bitcoin. We got Bitcoin. We'll get rich on Bitcoin. Yeah, but what about digital cash? I thought that was a thing. Nah, just buy Bitcoin. We're all going to get rich Bitcoin. Well, are you going to use some of that money for, freeing people, and now that you got crypto rich and you got, just buy Bitcoin, we're getting rich Bitcoin. When you're talking about governance in your project that you're working on, a lot of people equate that to the effort Palantir. We're going to surveil the crap out of everybody. Might as well be IBM and Nazi Germany, okay? So this is, I need to know if there is an overlap, a distinction, a threat, what you see is coming, my son goes, yeah, you're so dumb, Dad. You don't get it. The reason they did this Genius Act thing, you're never a prophet in your own lands, Sterlin, I just want you to know. But he goes, the reason they're doing this, the stable coin thing, and you got to buy treasuries with, and you got cryptos doing kind of just going to get, it's to suck up the liquidity of all the inflated dollars in the system. They're coming home, and it is going to get stupid. And if they didn't have crypto institutionally and the government, plowing in the crypto, gold and silver would shoot to the moon, and it's private and in the hands of the people, and they can't have that. How far off am I?
Yeah, brother, you're hitting the nail on the head. I think Yeah, this is a long conversation, and
I know we're going to need a 3-hour version.
Yeah,
we'll get to it.
I'm glad we're gonna have this one though, brother. So, yeah. One of the primary issues, and I'll start with Peter Thiel. So, and the sort of the difference between governance and then the things that he's after and trying to do. So, Peter Thiel is what we would refer to as a technocrat. He's the type of person who wants to see technology and various kinds of technologies be used to surveil, as you mentioned, surveil the population. He wants to be in cahoots and work with governments, which is exactly what Palantir does, in order to increase his own position, but also to increase the position of the state. You know, there's an irony built into this too, because in a public-facing way, Peter Thiel has described himself as a libertarian. Well, that's not 100% not true. It's one of those situations of don't look at what I say, look at what I do, right? And what he does is he creates technologies and he creates organizations and companies based around subverting people's freedom. I remember there was a recent interview with Thiel not too long ago where someone asked him if he thinks the human race should be extinct or if it would bother him or something to that extent. And there was this long, awkward pause, and there was this big vein in his head that just started fucking shooting out. And my dude, he couldn't even answer the question. He couldn't say, no, of course not. I don't want to see the eradication of the human species. Like, it's a very simple question to answer, and most people with a moral conscience would have been like, hell no, right? That's moronic. That's not what I want. So it really gives you pause to think about what is it he's trying to achieve. Okay, now the question of governance, just quickly. Again, governance is just a voluntary set of rules that we live by and engage by. It doesn't mean people can involuntarily surveil you, and we can call that governance, right? Governance is what we opt into, right? Under the libertarian doctrine and ethos, we believe in contractarianism, the idea that we should be able to opt into whatever kind of contracts we want. And what is a contract? A contract is a set of rules that we mutually agree to. But there's the key. There has to be explicit agreement in those contracts. That's one of this is just the key tenets of not only libertarianism, but decent human interaction. People agree to things and you go about it. If you don't agree to something and someone forces you to do it, that is called coercion, right? And we would naturally, I think most normal people, libertarian or not, would say that's not okay. If I don't agree to something, why should I be forced to do it, especially if it involves the use of violence? So governance and governance structuring and thinking about that, it's just how do we figure out what's the most optimal way to work together? What is the healthiest, most beneficial way to work together? What is a way to work together that we can prevent coordination failures and zero-sum game dynamics and all these things that cause our systems to corrupt, right? This is the point of governance done voluntarily. It's as an experiment to figure out what works and what doesn't. And when I say doesn't work, I mean turns into government, right? That's where that difference really is. So that's that.
You can't, piece. You have to.
That absolutely. Now we can get into the next thing about Bitcoin and crypto. I think it's very clear that Roger was right. He wrote the book Hijacking Bitcoin. I think right now governments are trying their best to co-opt and hijack it, and actually it has been, if we want to be frank.
Yep.
But the situation is a bit more nuanced than that, right? Yes, Bitcoin has been hijacked. They're going to use it to try to get an in on the cryptocurrency space in general, but we do have tools and opportunities outside of Bitcoin within crypto that help us fight back. And just to give a few examples of that, we have Monero, which is a privacy coin that is really, it's been strongly repressed. It just had someone provide an attack, like a 51% mining attack on it that actually was more marketing than, so it was more like a form of propaganda to try to propagandize against Monero, and I think that was largely just fabricated, possibly by some double agent or agent provocateur. Who knows what the truth is? But the fact is, cryptocurrencies like Monero and Xanos, to name another one, Zcash to some extent, are all tools and technologies that still fit the bill of the original impetus behind Bitcoin and crypto, which is to undermine the state apparatus. We could get into a little bit of the history of this if you want. So the ideas behind crypto, generally speaking, and Bitcoin were really created by people who functioned antithetically to the state, and these people were called cypherpunks, right? Timothy May wrote a famous treatise called The Crypto-Anarchist Manifesto. Eric Hughes wrote one called the Cypherpunk Manifesto, and these guys were all about securing privacy.
Yeah,
and
we had
liberty
Paul
and
Rosenberg on quite a bit from my generation. He was, part of that. This goes way back, man. This is not, new. This is understanding the technology caught up.
That's right. You're 100%. And you're familiar with the documents, Ernie. You've read the formative documents, and you gave me one that I hadn't even heard of. It might have been Rosenberg who wrote it. You'll remember. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it was like a document from the 60s or 70s, I think, maybe the 80s. But I do know that public-private key cryptography.
From crossbows to cryptography.
That's it. From crossbows to cryptography. Yep. But yeah, the early cryptographers were already working on solutions for public-private key cryptography, and they had to do this because this was something a lot of people don't know. And Stephen Levy wrote about this in a book called Crypto Wars. I think it's on the shelf back here somewhere. What happened is the NSA and the U.S. government, big surprise, big shocker, tried to keep these technologies, encryption technologies, not public, but private to themselves, right? That's a weird use of the term public and private, but they wanted to keep it secret and not provide it to the public or give it out in open. They didn't want to open source the knowledge, right? So that's why we had to figure out how it worked from a private perspective. And the guys who did this were university professors, but they were also hippies and cypherpunks at the same time.
This has been, you mentioned crossbows to cryptography, and the reason that was our introduction in the 90s as libertarian activists. What happened was the book basically says this. Of course, cryptography is illegal. They want to go after them, and the PGP, pretty good privacy by Zimmerman or something that came up with it. And the attorneys for that in free speech, were the same attorneys, helping, Cody Wilson on, 3D printing guns. And it's all the same thing. Freedom's like the same thing. What happened was the reason they want cryptography to be illegal because it empowers the individual the same way that crossbows did to the serfs out in the field. And you got a knight coming up saying, "I rule you," and a bolt goes through his chest, penetrates the armor, and goes, "Maybe not, I go back to plowing." Well, that was the whole point. It's like, of course they're going to make cryptography illegal, and you're not allowed, and the king says you can't, because what role is there for us if you guys can, don't need us, So you could see what was coming. My awareness came from the understanding, them going after blockchain and cryptography and so on, was because they couldn't control it. It was decentralized down to interactions of individuals. Well, they had to. I knew there was a way in. I go, well, where are the human beings? Well, it became the developers. Then you get Hal DeCastries, that was chairman of Bilderberger 2 years in a row, funds Blockstream, that goes in, funds the developers to do Bitcoin. You can't increase the block size, and we're going to make money. Might as well be GoldmanSachs.gov coin. Okay, I get it. Here it comes. All right? So that is what happened. And how it happened, where, and you can, even Roger's book, he was on promoting the book. Like 2 weeks later, after we were talking to Roger, he gets arrested, And it was, duh. But what happens is you start to understand from his book, what the facts of the matter, what happened, who did what, when, but it lacked the nuance of those of us that were in it and paying attention and knew the people of what was driving it, what was behind it. It was an intent, the intent of control, to eliminate the possibility of not being controlled. So I want to get back to, now we have blockchain. That's why I emphasize Xano. We're working with Xano because the intent of Xano is what you're talking about. Decentralization of information, trading of value, a digital cash, currency, all of these options for, multi-sig contracts, having all of the stuff that we have learned over the years that is necessary. Can there be the development of a crypto, a blockchain, whatever the hell, technological solution to self-governance in a community, and then that community dealing with another community of community. It's all voluntary down the individual. Can it be done? Well, Sterlin says, yeah, that's what you've been working on. This is what you want. Well, so have I. So that's why when we're doing Occupy the Land stuff, in parallel, we have a mesh network that's giving me 200 down, 100 up at 13-mile relays. I'm like, hello. You know, John Sneisen from the Economic Truth came down from Winnipeg. We put up a mesh system. Well, now what are we going to run on that mesh system? You have an anarchist market. You have a cryptocurrency going, Xano. So this is, man, don't think I haven't been thinking about it, okay? So then you're going along, and a lot of the things that you've done in the past with Smart Cash and you're advocating now is to that end. Well, you talked about these Zetis. I had on recently a woman that I knew from Libertopia and Joyce Brand that lives, promotes this free city kind of stuff.
I know Joyce.
It was just 2 weeks ago we had her on. And I can see this is what's coming. It's going to be the technological ability to free us and us have a much more responsive social structure that's based on free market and voluntarism. That's the threat. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to have crossbows and cryptography, man. This is exact. People need to go read that article. It was 1988 that was brought out. We published it in our local libertarian newspapers. I pimped the crap out of that thing because it demonstrates our understanding of what was, the goal and what was going on back in the day. So I am like, man, we need to have us an understanding. We're going all pirate. Freedom's only 62 miles away. You go 100 kilometers up, you're out of government jurisdiction. So here it comes, So that is why it's important to me to have an understanding of what it is that you're doing. And now, what's the possibility? Here in Arizona, they tried to do a thing called the Prosperity Zone, which is kind of a, Zeti thing. Well, who comes out against that? Well, everybody. The parties, the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. You got, the Soros guys, the politician guys, the president people, the elected officials. I mean, everybody. Oh, hell no. We can't let people be free because then they'd show they can be free and it'll work and they'll do it. And what will we do? It's not because they care about the children. It's not because about the environment. It's not because of anything other than they get carved out and people thrive. The future is abundance. It is so there, which is why we do on our pirateswithoutborders.com, at the top, we have like 8 categories: communication, energy, food, water, shelter, health, blah, blah, blah. You get that down, those categories of existence, down closer to the individual, all of a sudden, you don't need the monopoly of force. That's what those are afraid of. Who are they, you conspiracist? There are those that want to be left alone and those that just won't leave them alone. That's who those are. They're the ones that won't leave us alone. So, with that said, my question to you now, before you got to go, I need you to expand on what is necessary for us to implement the non-Palantir version of technical help for individual communities, and that you're advocating. We got a spaceship. We got to get the Precariat, our pirate ship out in the, we're going to, space and government's not invited. I mean, we got to go to Mars. I mean, what is it? Got out in the ocean, we're on the ocean front. I mean, is there any place that's on the drawing board? Oceania, Seasteady, all these things come up, and technically it is now possible. And we're doing it out the end of the trail, the end of 4 miles of road I had to build out in the desert. They come out here, they are just looking for me because there ain't nobody else out here, okay? So I'm looking, where are we going to do? Do we have to advocate for carving off me a square mile of government leave me aloneism? Do we go begging for them? Or do we do Galt's Gulch and get our ion cannon of F you and I'm here and you can't come? I mean, how are we going to eventually do this? Sterlin, monologue me, man. Go.
Yeah, brother. So Let me start with laying a little bit of groundwork here. So, because a lot of people, they probably hear us talk about these ideas about moving. Well, it's what we refer to as the exit ideology, or the idea of exit and build, where we exit the system, whether it's the physical system or the digital system, and then we build out. But a lot of people probably think exiting the physical system and having that as a way to disempower the state or to push back against it is a pie, is a pie in the sky kind of mentality. But this has actually been done before. Anyone who knows about the post-war situation in Czechoslovakia has probably heard of a term called the parallel polis. So what happened in Czechoslovakia is that the post-war years were what we saw was the rise of communism in the Czech Republic, which was in just Czechoslovakia. What ended up happening is, of course, being communism what it is, the people felt like they were being brutalized, the economy was shit. So what they created, and there's a number of individuals who did this, Václav Havel, Václav Benda, even Jiris, they put together what was called the parallel polis, or they sometimes refer to it as a second culture or an independent society. Really, it's a parallel society within that system. And what they said the use case for this parallel society for is to give people a free space for living, a space where they could have culture and their own community, peaceful or power resistance against the state or violent resistance against the state. The idea was that they could construct these institutions and structures as a way to push back against the state apparatus. So one of the first things that they did, I don't know, it was probably one of the first, is they created what in Czech was called samostat. Samostat was just material that had previously been censored by the communist regime. A lot of it was information about freedom, yada, yada, etc. And they passed this all around. They spread the samostat around, and it got people really fired up for the idea of freedom and the fact that they could have these parallel societies. Well, this all started in the 1960s, and it culminated in 1989 with the so-called Velvet Revolution. And the Velvet Revolution, the communist regime was basically ousted. Actually, they were ousted in a peaceful manner. There were a few small pockets of violence, usually related to students, where a couple of people did die, but overall there wasn't a massive coup, there wasn't a war, and there weren't massive casualties, right? So the communist regime was ousted. Of course, the problem is that these guys, these Velvet Revolutionaries, these guys who started the parallel polis, took over the democratic government. So nothing actually changed. It was just another case of the system just switched over with a different set of rulers, and it's already a broken system, so it's not going to work. They should have just expanded the parallel polis. But the point is this has been done in history, and it can work. All right, now fast forward to today. What we're doing right now, what's happening globally, is the way that I see it, having been to a bunch of these communities personally, is that we're re-envisioning that parallel polis movement that happened in Czechoslovakia, except we're doing it on a grand scale, right? So it's been done before, and we can do it again. Now, what is needed for this to work on a massive scale is we need a couple of things in place. One is we need the proper technologies. We need the proper infrastructure. Xano, which you just mentioned, Ernie, is the cryptocurrency component of this, and that could be also, of course, I'm not a maximalist, so it could be Monero, could be any number of these privacy tokens that give financial freedom back to these communities, which is a central theme. The other part is the part that I've been working on is we need governance, right? We need an understanding of the rule sets, and the expectation or the anticipation that I have is that all these communities are going to be different in nature. They're all going to have different people, yep. And the people are going to have their own ideas of what kind of system they want to live in, be it a syndicalist, more communist, quote unquote, kind of setup, or a more voluntarist one. I'm open-minded as long as it's voluntary, right? They can try whatever they want. And then the idea is that we ingest that data and that information from the societies that work, that prevent corruption, that prevent massive states from rising, and then we apply that into the future. This is what you call leveraging wisdom and understanding in our previous communities and setups, and actually putting that into practice. One of the things I talk about a lot, Ernie, and I think you'll see the gist of this, a lot of people say that democracy was this grand experiment in government. It was an experiment, but was it really? What ended up happening when democracy resurged, right? It was originally invented in ancient Athens, right? And everyone, I think, clearly understands that there was a benefit to democracy because a lot of things were invented in ancient Athens. Everything from early drama to science or natural science to philosophy to thinking, all that was invented in Athens, largely as a result of that type of culture that was set up there. That's not to say it was perfect, but when democracy resurged in the United States, it was as a result of a transitionary period, right? The old regime, the ancient regime, was falling, was failing, and everyone during the time realized that they didn't want to be led by monarchies, and they didn't want to be led by the religious caste who thought that they knew best for everyone else. This is what we refer to as the Enlightenment, the Enlightenment. Cool. So now what ended up happening as all these monarchies were collapsing, democracy was just copied and pasted all around the world, right? There wasn't any experiments ran. It was just assumed that it would be the best form of government for everyone else. But
sounded
that's
good.
Not how things transpired. Yeah, sounded good on paper, right? Sounded like cool, individual rights, a constitution, all the stuff that you mentioned earlier, Ernie. That sounds great. But of course, there are some things that we didn't figure out that we needed to figure out, which is why did these systems corrupt? Why did all the people involved start playing zero games with each other? Why was it all based on win-lose dynamics? Why wasn't there any sense of more cooperation and coordination rather than faltering, rather than abuses of power? Why did all that emerge? So we needed to figure that out before we did this democracy thing. And now we have an opportunity to actually get in there and understand governance, understand more about human dynamics and human nature in the context of these systems. We have an opportunity to actually fix the incentives, right? Okay, so there's governance, and then there's the cryptocurrency part of it. And then the thing that really is going to help, I think, push us to the next level is if we have the technology other than crypto, right? And this means we need technologies, peer-to-peer and decentralized, that allow us to deploy network states or cyber states that have an anonymity-enhancing component, that have different types of governance structures, that have incentive networks. And what I mean by this is, so you probably could use let me give an example. You probably can use a blockchain, and on blockchains, you have a thing called smart contracts. And smart contracts are just algorithmically executable code, right, that execute when certain conditions are met. So you apply those smart contracts to people living in the physical world as well, right? And you use the tokens and the incentives to create an environment where people are trying to coordinating in ways that don't harm others. So you try to minimize the zero-sum game. I'm not saying that governance is going to be perfect or the situation can be perfect, but one of the really cool things about these experiments we're having is that people don't have to get hurt, right? If you have, and this is the thing that's going to be a real challenge with all this, is you have to have the right of exit from these communities, right? Like the community that you're developing,
and keep
Prospera,
your stuff.
That's right. Property rights, unless those communities are a sharing community, that's their thing, and but the ability to be able to exit from these communities and go into communities that share your values, if it's like hardcore property rights, that's the community I would want to be part of, then
mine.
That's okay. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of things that have to happen, but I do very strongly believe that we're in a transitionary phase right now. We're on the cusp of a paradigm shift, and that's not to say that it's going to happen overnight. It could be multi-generational, but I do see very clearly that we have an opportunity here to get away from these abusive power structures and institutions that we've been embedded in for so long. And the key to this, I think, is definitely maximum decentralization, scaling back a lot of our institutions, keeping things more local and small. This was the original idea intended by the anti-federalists, right? The idea that everything is more flattened. And this has been written about, and I think this is a really good thing to think about. There was an economist, Leopold Kohr, who wrote a book called The Breakdown of Nations. And he makes a really strong case that having smaller sized, quote unquote, nations that are in like micronations that are distributed around the globe is there's evidence statistically and physically and empirically that demonstrate that those communities are a lot more peaceful. Another guy wrote about this, Kirkpatrick Sale, in a book called Human Scale Revisited. So I think there's a lot to say about trying to keep things small. And there's this notion of the Dunbar number, which just means that if we keep communities to around 150 people, those are the relationships that we can cognitively handle at one time, meaning that there's more human connectedness. And one final point I want to make, and then we can start wrapping it up. You know, you can do your finish things. I think we can go on and on about this. But one thing very much to consider is right now it's not, and I want to be clear about this and elucidate on it. It's not just about the fact that we have shit governments and that we have people trying to control us. That's a huge part of it, and it plays into this. But ultimately, what we're trying to do, I think we're trying to revitalize and regenerate our human connections. There's what's happening right now is what John Vervaeke calls a meaning crisis, or a crisis of meaning. A lot of people feel like they've lost touch and lost connection with other people, and as a result of that, rates of suicide, rates of mental illness have been on the rise. People feel more alienated and isolated than ever. And this, of course, feeds back into the shitty institutions that we have in our society. And it creates a sense of ennui in people, and a sense that they don't have any control and they can't do anything. So these communities give power back to people. So this helps solve that meaning crisis, which in turn will help solve these problems of corruption and really shitty institutions that we're living under. And this is the clear pill, right? This is the clear pill. This is the antagonist, or the answer, or the cure to the black pill. Okay, there it is.
Thank
the
you.
Monologue.
Now, this is a much larger conversation that we're going to need to have. And I was looking forward to doing it, now. But this is a good teaser. And what I want to do is, I'll just sum it up this way. There is a desire, a need, a direction that we are going. We are at a time where we have the ability to do this stuff. It's now possible. We have the mechanism, the technology, the communication, the transfer, storage, and use of ones and zeros. This is so important that we make sure that we take advantage of this opportunity, because I want to be sure that we understand there are people like Sterlin and a lot of others that have this as a goal and have the intelligence and the experience to see what is necessary for that to happen. From my standpoint, any community, because everybody wants Ernie and Donna to go be part of their whatever. Bring your love bus out and work on and be part of. Hell yeah, you want us, because we work. We're like productive and know what a shovel is and got a tractor and kind of be. I'd want me too. What makes you think I want you? Yeah, but we got a cool logo and we have. I don't give a crap. So my thing is, I have 3 questions. 1. What do I have to do? What am I obligated to? What am I agreeing to? 2, what can't I do? What is it I'm not allowed? You're not allowed to, well, I wanted to do that, what? And the 3rd thing, what's your conflict resolution? Because when you have a disagreement, you got to be dealing with that. Anybody I talk on their, exit and make something, and their little hippie commune of intentional community of freedom-oriented, but only voluntarists, anarchists get to live here kind of crap, they don't even think of those 3 questions. Well, we'll figure it out. No, you figure it out, and then you give me a call, all right? So my thing is I'm going, look, I want an unintentional community. I have my property. I got my 18 acres here. This is my fence line. This is mine. It's not yours. That over there may be yours, not yours. I don't care. This is not yours. This is mine. Mine. So once you have that property right respected there, and I put effort into building, do it for my family, future generation, whatever. And it'd be nice to have a big enough plot that, my concert's not bothering you too much. So this is where you have, because we had a 2-acre property in North Phoenix, and it was perfect. It was nice. We could do whatever we wanted, not bother the neighbors. We didn't scare the horses, So so I'm thinking, well, we need at least 10 acres for Donna and I and our 4 children's families. That's 10 acres. You each get 2 acres. We're not bothering each other. So we wound up with 18, even better. The point is that an intentional community you shoehorn your life into it. and then you got to comply with. And when you borrow the tractor or use the tractor, the community tractor, and it breaks, who fixes it? I mean, who is that fault? You always, well, we were in this one hippie commune, but how come you're not there now? Well, there was this guy or gal or family. Well, there's always that. So you have to, I want my property right protected. An intentional, community it's got fraught with all kinds of problems. I got mine. Then maybe I go to the barn dance. Maybe I'll help the guy with whatever. Maybe I'll lend him my whatever. Maybe I'll barter, trade. That's where the social structure comes in with like Xano, the Levolution decentralized, to where we can communicate. I want. I'll sell, I'll buy, I'll barter, I'll trade. Where's my next meal coming from? How many holes I got to dig for some eggs? This is what's coming. Because in my opinion, it's how humans are fundamentally structured. They will always act in what they perceive to be their own self-interest. And if their self-interest is they think sharing, we're all going to have to agree to whatever, and because that's the only way it'll work and I get what I want, and I'm going, yeah, but if somebody's not willing to do it, or it's like the Mayflower, the Pilgrims. They all died until they went to a free market. It's just from each according to their ability, to each according to I want you to give it to me. So this is so fundamental, and that's where we're going on this, and that's what we're doing with Occupy the Land. I just did a show on John Bush's program, and he'll be coming on here in a week or two, that we were at the Ron Paul birthday thing, and he came up and he goes, you were right. And because they were trying to do the intentional community thing, and it's always that one guy, that one fat, we had to get rid of that. Just didn't work. So it is a new revelation for a lot of us that get along with each other because we have a common view of the world, but not so common that you want them living in your house. I mean, it's just, that is, I think it's just a human thing for us to want control over our own lives, which means to sustain my life, to keep breathing in and out, have the right to provide for it, protect it. That's my liberty. Get the use of my hands to make, create, defend. You're not allowed to stop me from breathing in. And to fashion raw material and with my liberty and my life to create my property. It's just three ways of saying the same thing. Freedom's the answer. What's the freaking question? So for next time, Sterlin and I are going to drill down on this. And I know you're looking, for support of what you're doing. And I offer a use case. This is what Occupy the Land is. It's a movement. I am very keen to movements. It's a revolution, It's a paradigm shift of I freaking read Rothbard. I took Molly and I'm kind of like, woo, I got clarity. I did some ayahuasca and damn it, I already, super processed my brain over, 5 minutes and lived a lifetime of 70 years and I figured it out, and then one evening this is happening right now. I've seen it. I interview others, I get it. But I'm 64. I'm counting on Sterlin to save the planet for my grandchildren. And I want to help. I want to be part of. I want to provide a use case. I want to demonstrate what is possible. And the central planners do not want that. Oh, hell no. You're not allowed to demonstrate, prosperity and freedom by individual action. You're just, no, hell no. That's so not freaking allowed. So, we're going to leave it there. I wanted to make sure that people got a little introduction, that our next conversation, we're going to go until you're boring or bored. So carve off a morning and evening and afternoon and all nighter or whatever, because here we go. It is now time for those people just like you that went from teenager, 20-something-year-old, got Rothbarded and Ron Paul'd up, and now it's later. It's a decade and a half and having kids and married and gotten what I want to live free in the future of, and have the ability, the contact, and the technology to do it. I know this. This is what I've been building up to. So here we freaking go. Final word, Sterlin.
Yeah, brother. I absolutely enjoyed this, and you're right. We're going to be able to unpack this, and I agree with you 100%. We're on a path to being able to change the world for the good. And by the way, I'm game to actually do this even next week if you want. So I have a bit of open time next week. So anyway, we can definitely do that. If anybody wants to be able to find my work, they can of course find me on. I'm most active on X. Yeah, you can find me over there at X at Sterlin Lujan. And then, of course, you can find my work at Polis Labs at polis-labs.org. And then you can find my Substack there. And also, if you type in Counter Governance and Sterlin Lujan, that's my primary blog. Both are very active, or at least active enough where I'm publishing monthly. So, yeah, man, this was a great time, Ernie. Thanks so much. Let's try to do it again next week so the conversation is fresh and I can set aside some time to do a long segment with you, and we can go really into the weeds of all this stuff.
Yeah, Donna's going to set it up. You got to go. Today is Cheers. August 29th, 2025. The archive's up there. All those contacts we put up there in the show notes for Sterlin. Peace, brother. Thanks for coming on, man. Go, go, go.
Yeah, man. Really enjoyed this, Ernie. See you, man.
This is, Sterlin's one of my favorite people. And he's just a good guy. And I had Donna put in some bios on him, archive to different projects that he's been on, other interviews that he's done talking about, his life and so on. And in the crypto space and anarchist and he's one of my favorite people, and I'm sure now you see why. This is, we did a short version here, it's an hour, and we're at an hour and 5 minutes right now, 6 minutes. And I'll wrap it up, but I tell you, I am very impressed with some of the people in the movement that I have. Whenever I see Sterlin at any event or whatever, it's a big hug. And his wife, she's great. They're all just, and who he associates with. I am very selective. I don't clutter my life with, once they get to be kind of toxic or, they're not necessarily bad people. They're just not ads. They're either, they need, or they're looking for their next, pump and dump, or they're doing, whatever. I hang with them, party and smoke a doob and watch the fire and, have a good time and introduce them to people. And they're not too malevolent, but people like Sterlin are adds to humanity because they have the goal. They understand what is important. They are, the end result is their goal, and it's not just the end result, it's the means by which you attain it. Well, we'll be like the bad guys until we get what we want, then we'll be good. No. Those that can't be bad, it's not their nature. Sterlin is one of those guys, and when I talk to him about this kind of stuff, what's going on and coming on, and we'll extend our conversation next week. Hopefully Donna and him work it out. But you really want to listen to that one, because we're going to flesh out a whole bunch of meat on the skeleton, man. We're gonna build it into something that our children and grandchildren can experience, support, aspire to. And the biggest realization that you start to have is that there are sociopaths, psychopaths, lack of compassion, love, empathy. It's not in them. They don't care. They can't care. They don't have that part of the brain done where they don't care. Yeah, but I don't care what you want. This is what I want. And I'm going to use this here gun and shiny badge and clipboard to make sure I get it. Sucks to be you. I'm in charge. I rose up through the ranks and got elected. Shit, I'm elected. I'm in charge now, bitch. Do what I say. This is where humanity, general public opinion, has to be, spread so that the net just captures people that are predisposed to justice, predisposed to wanting to be just left alone, because there's way more of them than there are the bad guys. Just saying. Now, they're not as willing to use the means of force and violence to get what they want, which is what, in this current system, gives bad guys the advantage. because they're willing to do whatever to get whatever it is that they want. Do you want the good guys to go bad so that they can wear the shiny, ring? They get a shiny badge. They're in charge. What's the difference? You got to maintain your humanity. You got to maintain that which is good. You got to maintain, and you can get it in a lot of different ways. To me, it's that's why I find more the real good Christians in the anarchist libertarian movement than I do in the Republican Party. It was amazing to me how many people of faith that you see, they answer to a higher authority, a higher calling. A friend of mine said one time, he goes, you know why they did the 10 Commandments? Because they didn't know better. Somebody needed to write it down. It said, thou shalt not be a dick. Rule 1, don't be a dick. Then you get this Klingon, Romulan freaking mentality of, man, you're not worthy until you go, Viking people and kill them and take all their crap and look at what I got. It's just, hopefully this enlightenment, what we're coming to realize, and it is part of our true human nature to cooperate, to be social. You want to be liked. You don't want to be, everybody goes quiet. You walk in the room and they start, moving away from you. We're social creatures. We want to be an ad. We want to be, hey, so-and-so's here. Yeah, it's glad to see you, man. It's always good to have you. When you're an add to your community, you feel better. We are emotional creatures. It's all about the feels. It's a shortcut to logic and reasoning. Ayn Rand was going on about how love was just a shortcut, to a lot of things. But there is a rational and logical reason of why our endocrine system is, our sex drive, our being social creatures, that we have empathy. Why do we care? That poor person is kind of, here's some of my money for you to get. Why? What evolutionary, intelligent design, whatever was that? Why? We benefit. Not just as individuals and families, as a species. But it's being attacked on a regular basis. That's not the way to live. We conquer you. We got bigger aircraft carriers. We're going to whip your ass. And then what happens when they got bigger aircraft carriers? Hypersonic, blah, 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 blah. Ion cannon, the phaser, whatever the hell. We have to enlighten ourselves. And when you are exposed to certain ideas that ring true with your sense of justice and empathy, you gravitate towards them, but there are roadblocks. There are people and institutions and governments and churches and schools and the healthcare industries and military industrial new world order banking complex of we rule you people, that is they, them, those, won't leave you alone, that are in the way of our advancement and evolution towards truth. And the truth is not lies. Truth, what truth? Well, it's not a lie. So when you have transparency, and what Sterlin was talking about, what if we could, analyze our circumstance, what produced the most joy, the most benefit, the most abundance for people, just so you know. We're going to mandate, well, you got to do it this way because it's better than that way. Just so you know. Because people will act in what they perceive to be their self-interest, including being bad. Rule 1, don't be a dick. Peace!